it's necessarily just that the spring and the flowers out there are making me feel this way, but it's actualizing something that I've been sitting with for quite a while and wanted to sort of share with you tonight. And this notion of what we call the Buddha field, or how we can envision, how we can see sort of the truth of the cosmology upon which Buddhism is built. Yeah. At least much of the Buddhist tradition, especially in the Mahayana traditions, is built on kind of a realization of the nature of totality of all things as they are. This is certainly something that we cultivate through our practice over time, perhaps have some realization spontaneously on the cushion, or if we're hiking, or we're just sort of having a moment where the mind is not sort of hijacking the narrative of our lives. The impression, the view of all things as occurring within this larger spacious reality that we call, in Buddhism, we call it Dharmadhatu. And so I'll explain all that in a bit after we do our beginning, our bodhicitta aspiration. But it's really quite something. For me personally, it's been really important. It's informed my view sort of on the larger arc of things, on the larger scale. Yeah. And it's not easy to hold on to it when the mind is busy and distracted, but I'm hoping that you'll get some benefit from this. It's what we might call an ontology. Yeah. Ontology is this fancy term for kind of understanding our being within the larger world. We can perhaps see it as an epistemology, yeah, a way of knowing, sort of a view of how we know what we know, and in some cases even a theology. So, and there are many other ologies we can probably apply to it. Anyway, certainly it's a Buddhology. It's a way of kind of understanding Dharma on not just in a meditation practice, but as a way of seeing kind of the larger reality. So I don't know what you are carrying this weekend, what you're holding, what kinds of sorrows, discontentednesses, concerns, worries, anxieties, what kinds of clouds, whether they're dark clouds or high, fluffy, stratocumulus clouds, whatever they may be, whatever is in your space is there. And here's the good news that Buddhism has to offer. Despite the fact that the first noble truth is life is suffering, and what it means by that is because of impermanence, we experience life in constant discontentedness, disappointment, clinging is the root, the second noble truth, and so on. And yes, there is a way out, and the way out is the Eightfold Path. So those are the Four Noble Truths. Now, from the standpoint of how we start these Four Noble Truths, it may not always feel like life is difficult, and I certainly hope that you're in a good place and doing well. And if, despite that, whether you're in a good place, you're in a neutral place, or in an unpleasant place, as the Buddha is always telling us, look and notice what the nature of your experience might be. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. It is all occurring. It is all playing out within this fabric of reality that is greater than any thought, any one concern, than any situation that we may find ourselves in. This we may know intellectually, and what many of the great masters are trying to get us to see is that despite what you're experiencing and despite what you may be immersed in, this view of reality with a capital R, this view of the mystery with a capital M, and so on, is so vast and so filled with what in Buddhism we call radiance. This extremely subtle but all-pervasive quality that is what we call the Buddha field or the Buddha mind. And it is all-pervasive. So even though we are taught things like emptiness, especially in Mahayana Buddhism, which is a very poor translation of shunyata, rather thinking of it as profound openness. And this quality of profound openness is what in Tibetan Buddhism is known as Dharmadhatu, or what is otherwise translated as space. It's Ying is the Tibetan word, which means space or spaciousness. And that this quality is the essence of all things, and it is fundamentally luminous. Now, if you've been paying attention to quantum mechanics at all, to some of the particle physics and theoretical sciences, we know that everything is made up of vibration. However solid it appears, yeah, everything is vibrating. There is this kind of vibrational quality that is very much alive, even at the heart of our own consciousness. And it doesn't stop with the localized body. It doesn't stop with the skull, yeah? But rather it permeates us, it surrounds us, it binds the galaxy together, to quote George Lucas. It's true. He didn't get this in Star Wars. He didn't get this out of his own head. This is fundamental Buddhist cosmology. And so what we call this Dharmadhatu, or the word dhatu, D-H-A-T-U, it just means a realm. Yeah? And of course, Dharma is sort of the nature of truth, of reality as it is. Unobfuscated, unobstructed by all that we bring to it with our own projections and thoughts and traumas and all of these things, right? Our narratives. Now, that just doesn't discount or deny that we have these things. Absolutely. These are great, painful obstacles on whatever path you may be on. But this notion of Dharma realm is really meant to convey the heart of this field of truth, of this profundity of potentiality. This is really the nature of this Dharma realm. And the reason that we can also call this a Buddha field is largely because this process experiences itself as fundamental consciousness. It is this quality that is what we might call unborn, but is pure potentiality. And so out of this field arise formations. Yeah? Out of this field arise things that appear real. And they do exist for a while. It's just that they are impermanent. And they don't exist in the way we think they do. This is what's known as non-self, yeah? Or the state of emptiness, where the meaning we attribute to things doesn't mean that those things are inherently what we think they are. In fact, we can't conceptually understand something accurately. We're just seeing it through a filter. And so from this source of what we might call sort of this Buddhist cosmology, that whatever arises, the light, this luminous subtlety that arises both from within us and is all around us, is constantly being filtered through grosser level, what do you call those things that cover lights, like stained glass windows. There's always a shape, there is always an image, there is always kind of a mosaic, and it may be beautiful or it may be dingy, yeah? But this sort of pure, what's called clear light in Tibetan Buddhism is constantly being filtered through these thought forms. And so so part of what we do in meditation is try to settle the mind, to calm just this monkey mind, this elephant of heaviness and sleepiness, find sort of the middle path between these two places, and find a sweet spot of just this perfect balance between effort and effortlessness, where the mind settles and this sense of mindful presence arises naturally. We're not, after all, creating something that isn't already there. Why? Well, because the nature of things is in line with this notion of Buddha field, the consciousness of the Buddha mind, if you will. Yeah? And this too is a concept. This too is a concept. And quite a helpful one, in my opinion. Because as I go outside, and the other day we were up to 80 degrees here in the Boston area. It was beautifully sunny. I was attending a conference at HDS. And whenever I left the room after like hours of sitting around the table and drinking coffee and talking about all kinds of Dharma things with the cohort, the sky was so clear, and I was reminded of this quality. Oh yeah, right. This is the Dharmadhatu here. Yeah, this is a mirror of the Dharmadhatu. The sky was clear, open. There were a few kind of wispy clouds here and there. It had this warmth to it, and all was possible. This is a way of experiencing, perhaps, on a conceptual level, on a grosser level, this quality of the Buddha field. And within that, things arise, yeah? Thoughts arise, experience, commentaries, of course. And yet, the Buddha field remains. It remains unstained. It remains like a mirror with reflections that are constantly coming and going. And this is one reason why Dharmadhatu, this notion of Dharmadhatu, is one of 5 wisdoms in Buddhism, is the first, actually. It also is sometimes called suchness, because we are cognizant in a very clear and open way of the nature of things as they are, without the filters, without the stained glass windows, without the projections. And if you will, this experience of non-conceptual awareness, this is another way of thinking about it. So that's the first of 5 wisdoms. Following that is mirror mind, or mirror awareness, that understands consciousness as being a reflector. Yeah? That this quality of mind just reflects form. It reflects our own kind of aspirations. It reflects our own sort of imaginings and dreams and commentaries and so on. But the mirror itself remains clear. And there's a practice around this, cultivating the mirror mind in meditation, just letting the mind be clear, and whatever arises is just a reflection, and it's constantly going to be changing, but the mind itself remains clear. Anyway, the third wisdom is the awareness of unity, of sameness, is sometimes called. Non-duality is another way to talk about it. The awareness, then the fourth is the awareness of deep, wise inquiry, meaning that you begin to see how things fit together. You begin to really understand the nature of things. There is this discriminative awareness. And then the fifth is an awareness that is more sort of utilitarian. It's very practical. And it's interesting that Dharmadhatu is the first on this list. Now, this is not linear, by the way. These are different aspects of consciousness, or wisdom arising from awareness, from attunement to a certain frequency, if you will. And part of this has to do with why the Noble Eightfold Path begins with right view. Yeah? Right understanding. This is early on. And part of this, we can work with this concept of, wow, this is unfolding, this is happening. And the reminder that it is being held, whether I can feel it or not, it's being held by this all-pervasive truth. Yeah, despite feeling sorry for myself or the narrative that comes, and we all experience these things, these sort of projections onto what's happening. But the reminder that everything is playing out within the Buddha field. Things are manifesting from this place, and they are receding back into this place. There's a sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, in the Pali Canon, talking about the mystery, the entire mystery being present within a grain of dust, almost like a hologram. Yeah, you have this notion that there is completeness in every part of that which makes up the totality. Or as in another metaphor, that the ocean, being reality, is going to come with a very, very deep, still abiding at the bottom where the water is still and perhaps clear. But at the top, there are all these waves that happen. It's all part of sort of a subtle to a gross continuum of awareness. As light is filtered through the mind, the projections we add to it basically create our experience. As light is filtered through this mechanism of mind, the projections that we add to it are what create our experience. This doesn't mean that we don't experience anything else, yeah? We may be neutral and have an experience, but largely, if there's any kind of apprehension, perception, clinging, attachment, or aversion, or complete deludedness about it, then this is what is unfolding. On the other side of this, interestingly, we're talking about a polarity here, despite things being non-dual. For a mind that is clear, for a mind that we might say is awake, the Dharma body of light is simply seen to be as it is. It's seen to be the totality of the realms that we inhabit. And you begin to see it in all things that are existing. In some forms of Buddhism, this all-pervasiveness of the luminosity of things as they are is seen to be embodied by the great Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light, to whom we occasionally here have chanted. And Amitabha, or in Japan, Amida Buddha, is seen to be an embodiment of this ultimate Dharma body out of which all things arise. In other words, what we might call the original Buddha. And as one sort of aspect of that is this other term called the Tathagata Garbha. Has anyone heard this term? Tathagata Garbha. Yeah, which one has? This, what we can call this womb or this embryonic state of perfect awakening. And when we say perfect, we're not talking about some unreachable goal. We're talking about a very natural state of utter Buddha potential. And so Garbha, this word Garbha means womb or embryo. It's almost the matrix out of which becoming becomes. Yeah. And Tathagata, often this word Tathagata referring to the Buddha in many texts, the awakened one, the perfect one, however you want to, whatever works for you here. But this is someone who is realized. And the first three syllables of that, ta-ta-ta, this isn't something you're saying to your toddler if they do something wrong. Ta-ta-ta is really the word for suchness, these three syllables. And suchness, this sense of utter clarity of reality just as it is, without the added things. This is what the Dharmadhatu is really about. And it is that quality of reality within which all of the cosmos is playing itself out. The Buddha field, if you will. So all things are actualized, produced, come into being through causes and conditions. This is why interdependence is a fundamental reality within the Buddha field. All things arise independence upon each other, and on their own they have no inherentness. Yeah? It doesn't mean that they don't exist fully or that we don't experience things. But then these things then dissolve based on the truth of impermanence back into the totality of the realm of the Buddha field. And yet they continue, those causes and conditions themselves continue to be encompassed by it. Now, there's one other term that is linked to this. And, we couldn't really talk about Dharmadhatu without talking about the three kayas. In some cases, there are four, the three bodies. One is Nirmanakaya, which we have done this, and I think there's a video on YouTube about this, about the four bodies. The Nirmanakaya is sort of the physical manifestation, the physical form. The Sambhogakaya, what we might call the emanation body or the body of energy, and in its subtlest form, in its most refined form. The essence of Dharmadhatu is also very much alive. Yeah? And then Dharmakaya is the mind and wisdom aspect of the Dharmadhatu. So it is that aspect, that body of wisdom that reflects the Buddha, that reflects the qualities of the Buddha and what he taught. Or rather simply the enlightened mind. We can also think of it in those terms. And so Dharmadhatu is the playing field, if you will. It's the truth of things as they are. And the Dharmakaya is the body of consciousness that we experience, that we work with for insight and for realization. So this is hopefully another helpful way to think of these very potentially obscure terms, but that have definite import to them. So how is this helpful? I have no idea. Okay, I do have an idea. And again, I come back to the time of year that we're in, the springtime, where things are coming into becoming. The becoming itself is transitioning from this unborn seed state into manifested beauty. Yeah, especially if it's spring where you are, unless you live in a perpetually warm climate or cold climate. Heaven forbid that be the case. But we can recognize, perhaps, just be reminded in moments, going outside, or even just within our living space, to be reminded of what surrounds us, what is around us, not just outside the walls of our abode, but also within the space of the abode, as a reflection of what is also deeply at the heart of our own Buddha nature. Even if we can't feel it, that's fine. But be comfortable at least with having some sense that this is possible, that this is the truth of things as they are, and letting that be your faith, your confidence, that whatever you're experiencing is happening in this context of luminosity and love, all-pervasive love. After all, out of the great field of Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite light, arises the Bodhisattva of profound compassion, of Avalokiteshvara. So compassion and a state of deep, profound love is never far away. So maybe this reminder helps you. I don't know. As I said, I don't know where you are today, this weekend in your life. But I find that it really gives me sort of this reminder, gives me enormous comfort. And that I too am a part of it, just as that grain of dust encompasses the entirety. I just need to remember. And maybe even practice some mindful awareness, some mindful breathing, so that all that other stuff just can settle on its own and I have a glimpse, even for 15 minutes. So the coach in me says the news is actually really good, despite the darkness that is arising and that has arisen in our world, that is polarizing people to this day. That too is happening within the Buddha field. So the causes and conditions are there for a different way of life on the collective level. Our karma, our collective karma, can be quote unquote purified to a point where things begin to feel and look more wholesome on a much larger scale. But it's not easy, yeah, as we know. And so we need something to hold on to at this stage, in what Buddhists often will call this degenerated stage, yeah? The stage where things are very difficult and there is darkness out there. But according to the Buddha and the great masters and realized ones, this is the nature of things, this Buddha field. It can't be stifled. It can't be sullied. It can't be impure in many ways, as much as it may feel like it is. And I think one of the keys is to keep your heart open, keep cultivating the qualities of the bodhisattva. Cultivating bodhicitta continues to help keep the heart wide and spacious, because that spaciousness of the heart is, from a Tibetan standpoint, this notion of spaciousness is the Dharmadhatu. It is fundamentally open. And so some of that is just reminding ourselves of this. If we need to come back and watch this video again, please do, yeah? Because it is, over time, this will get into the subtle consciousness. This is why practice requires repeated practice. And sitting on the cushion, yeah? Perhaps chanting to Amitabha Buddha is also that connecting, that reminder with the vastness of this radiant universe. And whatever else is happening, our perspective adjusts to accommodate that truth to a point where it helps to liberate us and not make us feel small, because we too are part of that. We too are that cell of the Dharmadhatu in the larger reality.